Get started here. This is so a couple of people asked. This is the last week with me with David, and then next teaching after me is it Mark?
Mark Wilson.
Mark, do you know what he's teaching?
I think it's Galatians, but I can't promise you that.
Maybe he'll be. Yeah. I could pick his class for him before he comes in. But yeah, so this will be the last week, kind of recapping and then kind of talking about what today will be. Last week we ended where basically David was anointed king. That's where we wrapped up last week, and then now we're gonna move into. We're not quite where I hope to be at this point, but that's okay. We're definitely not going to get through everything, but again, I'm okay with that. I would rather the discussion. I would rather the class participation than hitting the wickets or hitting the last bullets that I have. Today is going to be. There's a lot. There's still a lot left. Again, we'll be talking on the military side, but there's too much that you can't pass up with David, just because it goes into all the things he's done. I mean, it just ties into who he is as a person. And I know I love 2 Samuel chapter 6. Well, I love it. Maybe love's not the best word. I respect it. It reminds me daily of our God. It reminds me, it brings a human side, I think, to like you see a more human side to David than I think you normally do. I mean, you see this guy, he's a shepherd, he goes in and he fights a giant, and I can't relate to that. But when you bring in 2 Samuel chapter 6, there's a lot there that to me I relate to, but at the same time, it makes me fearful. The same. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 5 through 11. Anybody want to read that?
David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with songs and with harps, lyres, tambourines, sistrums, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it aside to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household.
There's a lot of emotion in that part. So you go to, I mean, you just start hearing about David 1. So David was angry. Right? And David was afraid. And you see a reaction out of David that you're not used to seeing. I mean, the first time I read it again, David was angry. Like, David was angry? And then he became afraid. So afraid to the fact that we know he didn't bring the ark. He didn't continue with it until he found out that it was doing good deeds for others, and then he wanted to bring the ark in. It's the thought process behind that, and the instant death of Uzzah and the fear that came from it. I can't go past that, right, with David, because it builds who he is. It talks about his emotions that he has, and it's just to me, Uzzah is a prime part in talking about the ark and seeing the reaction and seeing the human side, like the human reaction of David, and I don't want to. I mean, I see that as he's almost the mistake there. Like, I see that piece as the mistake with the ark, where he was afraid and angry, or he was angry and then he was afraid, And he didn't want to bring the ark in, and almost like a knee-jerk reaction of, well, okay, well, I don't want to. That's scary. That's bad. Like I don't want to. I'm not going to bring that with me. And then, oh, wait a minute, it's doing great for them. Oh, okay, well, I want it. I want that with me. Thoughts on that? I like I said, I really, Uzzah to me is one of the parts where you can't pass it over. You can't. I mean, when you get into 2 Samuel, you have to talk about it. And like I said, David's thoughts with it. Go ahead.
Wasn't the ark supposed to be in the tabernacle?
Yes.
So why was he moving it anyway?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I was like, what is he asking me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I see the, all right. Yeah, it was coming. He was bringing it back from the Philistines. And then,
They're not transporting it correctly.
Right.
oh, okay. Yeah, so Adam and I wish Adam was here. Adam and I were
David
talking
may
about,
have had ulterior motives, but what's being done is actually, it needs to be done. They still needed it. And I think only either the priests or the Levites could move it, but have to double check that one.
But it was more than that. He could have researched how it should have been done, and he didn't, because God had said all his holy things had to be on poles on shoulders. David, one, wasn't told to do it, and then two, didn't make sure it was done correctly. So both he and Uzzah sinned, because then the other thing is Uzzah touched, and you're not to touch the holy things.
yeah. Like I said, there's like, I like Uzzah. And then, yeah, yeah, I guess when you look at it and you think about it, I was curious where you're going with that. I was like, yes, the transport of it. But again, Uzzah is one of those things that I like looking at, and then it just ties into David. But any other comments with that?
So we can all be victims of unintended consequences because we're trying to make the best of the situation that we're in when it's not God's situation. So I think God was angry.
Yeah.
About the situation.
I would agree. Yeah.
God had said what to do, and they weren't doing it. And if he didn't punish them for it, then in future, just like if you have kids and you tell them you're going to punish them for something, but you never do, they realize they can get away with it. If God hadn't come right then and there and punished for doing exactly what he said not to do, there would have been, less care taken in the future with his holy things.
I don't know pretty much anything about what I'm going to say here, but which is, I could just save that for every time I speak. But anger is rarely just by itself. Anger is accompanied by something else or some other feeling or insecurity or emotion that's coming up in anger. So David is angry, and we don't really know what that companion, but it's probably a very high probability that there was a companion emotion that was in David. And so when he was angry at God, then it could have been fear, it could have been guilt, it could have been a lot of things, guilt that he hadn't done exactly what Chris had said, but anger is rarely by itself. So there's something, and so I think he probably was realizing a lot in that moment when he becomes angry.
No, that's and we'll see. So like David's anger in this one, and it's going to be weird as his time matures. When we go a couple more slides, where you see completely different side of David, where his forgiveness and his compassion will come in. But good. All right. So David and Michelle. You say it Michelle. Google told me you say it Michelle. Right? Michelle is how it's pronounced. So with this part, I was going to, because I knew we had a lot to do, a lot to hit, but I still want to talk about this because a characteristic of David, when I was young, so I'm a horrible singer. I'm a really bad singer. I don't understand the tones when you blow in the thing. I don't understand what you're doing, and I don't get any of it, right? When I was young, like 11, 12 years old, we had a youth minister, and we would all sit up in the front in the church that I grew up in, and I would not really sing because I was not very good. So I would kind of like sit there, and he pulled me aside, and he talked to me and said, you're not singing. And I was like, I am. And he was like, you're not singing loud. And then he brought up this passage. So this one, like, I'm very near and dear to me when you talk about David and Michelle. So 2 Samuel, the ark's return, or the ark is, as the ark of the Lord came into the city of David, Michelle, the daughter of Saul, looked out of the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, and she despised him in her heart. She despised him in her heart because it's not kingly, like he's not holding himself in a manner as a king should. He's showing emotion, and in that day and age, and I mean even still a little bit in this day and age, not to the same extreme. I mean, if you start showing emotions, you can be looked at as weaker. You start being looked as weaker, people can overthrow you. People overthrow you, they don't just kill you, they kill your whole family. There's a whole lot that goes into that about not showing emotion. And then, so the part that he was showing me, he wasn't showing me that David was leaping and dancing. The part that he was showing me is in 6:20. And David returned to bless his household, but Michelle, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet David and said, how the king of Israel honored himself today, uncovering himself today before the eyes of his servants, female servants, as one of the vulgar fellows shamelessly uncovers himself. And David said to Michelle, it was before the Lord who chose me above your father and above his house to appoint me as prince over Israel, the people of the Lord, and I will celebrate before the Lord. He didn't care. He was celebrating for the Lord. He wasn't there to celebrate or sing or impress the people. He was there to celebrate before the Lord. That's what he was telling me. So, end all be all, I should be singing. And I still sing, and I sing out, but that was a passage. It was another lesson for me. It was another time that I was looking at it, and that is a great example from David. You saw anger and fear, and then right after that, now you're seeing an example of David showing you that he's not worried, he's not concerned what his servants are thinking. He's focused on what the Lord cares about, that he's standing there and praising the Lord. So that's just something that I've always taken from it. And then all the people who can sing that I already know in this room are laughing because that's okay. That's all right. But yeah, David and Michelle. Getting back on military stuff, we're moving up to 2 Samuel. We're getting in chapter 8. So we have a couple battles, a couple victories from David that, like, it's weird. And I know I keep saying it, and it's a broken record, but you're talking about, oh, we saw the side of David, David was angry. Oh, we saw the side of David, David was afraid. Oh, we saw the side of David, David was rejoicing before the Lord. And now we're seeing kind of a merciless David. We're starting to see the warrior that David is in 2 Samuel chapter 8, 1 through 8. So if anybody who has that wants to read that.
In the course of time, David defeated the Philistines and subdued them. And he took Methag-Ammah from the control of the Philistines. David also defeated the Moabites. He made them lie down on the ground and measured them off with a length of cord. Every 2 lengths of them were put to death, and the 3rd length was allowed to live. So the Moabites became subject to David and brought tribute. Moreover, David fought Hadadezer, son of Rehob, king of Zobah, when he went to restore his control along the Euphrates River. David captured 1,000 of his chariots, 7,000 charioteers, and 20,000 foot soldiers. He hamstrung all but 100 of the chariot horses. When the Arameans and of Damascus came to help Hadadezer, king of Zobah, David struck down 22,000 of them. He put garrisons in the Aramean kingdom of Damascus and the Arameans became subject to him and brought tribute. The Lord gave David victory wherever he went. David took the gold shields that belonged to the officers of Hadadezer and brought them to Jerusalem. From Terah and Berothai, towns that belonged to Hadadezer, King David took a great quantity of bronze.
So there's a lot of big numbers in there, and for me, that's not there's a lot of big numbers. There's a lot went on, right? Kind of starting with the first part, his victories over the Philistines. So the Philistines in all of 1st and 2nd Samuel. We talked about them in the beginning. We talked about their part, talked about their technological advances, and David is having victories over them. The Philistines are taking control of towns, and David's taking them back, right? Like that's instead of small battles, he's taking big battles and winning. And the part in the end that says it over again, and the Lord gave David victory everywhere he went. David's treatment of Moab. So in 1 Samuel 22nd or chapter 22. So this is one of the ones that, because I read it so many times over again, learning from others as to read it, then read it again. You go to 1 Samuel chapter 22, verse 3 and 4. I'll go there. Maybe. Maybe somebody else can go there. I can't click it.
My God is my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation. He is my stronghold, my refuge, and my Savior. From violent people you save me. I called to the Lord, who is worthy of praise, and have been saved from my enemies.
That was, what was it? 2nd Samuel? I'm sorry. I know I'm bouncing around. It's my fault because I'm bouncing around from 1st and 2nd Samuel. This is 1st Samuel. I can grab it. So you I don't know what happened with me clicking on my thing, but it wouldn't let me. But now I have it. I can grab it. Thank you. And David went from there to Mizpah of Moab, and he said to the king of Moab, "Please let my father and mother stay with you till I know what God will do for me." And he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with them all the time that David was in the stronghold. So he goes to Moab, and he was with them. He left his mother and father in Moab. But then you read when we get into 2 Samuel how David treated Moab, right? So he lined them up. Remember this part? I keep clicking the wrong button. Go to it. And he defeated Moab, and he measured them with a line, making them lie down on the ground. 2 lines he measured to be put to death, and 1 full line to be spared. And the Moabites became servants to David and brought tribute. So, 1 Samuel, he left his mother and his father with the king of Moab. 2 Samuel, he lined them up 2/3, and then 2 lines he measured, put them to death, 1 full line he spared. I don't know how the treatment, and I tried to look and see. You can't. I haven't found it. If you have, I would love to know. I don't know how the treatment went of David's mother and father, but I don't know if that played a part. I mean, we know that he was working victories for the Lord. That is just, it's one of those times that you see that. I mean, a chapter or a book ago, we've got David and leaving his mother and father with him, and now he's lining them up and 2 lines killing, and 1/3. He spared 1/3. Like I said, it's one of the notes that you see that this is the warrior in David. David and the chariot, the horses. That would have been, so breaking that piece off and seeing, and David hamstrung all the chariot horses, but left enough for 100 chariots. Those would have been really beneficial if you're a warrior and you're trying to win battles, the horses and the chariots and utilizing those. Yeah, go ahead.
Off the top of my head, the Israelites are not allowed to have war horses. I'd have to go back and find it, but what David did by they would be good for plowing, and that's it. They wouldn't be able to run. But to have chariots, I don't think God is happy with this, but that's just my opinion.
No, well, so when you, I mean, that like goes into the piece of, so this, him taking the chariots and hamstringing them and not utilizing them, it's because it wasn't part of God's plan. That's just, it's one of those things that if you, on your side as a tactician, if you're looking at this as a tactician, those are great tools. Those are great weapons for you to use, but he didn't use it. He kept 100 of them, and then I didn't think about. I mean, he could have kept all of them and then utilized them, but his faith was in the Lord when it came to that piece, and he didn't. But I didn't think about using the 100 for plowing, for farming, just for travel. But it shows that piece of, on a tactical mindset, you want those. That's the latest and greatest. That's the newest weapon system. That's what you want. But he didn't. He broke them, hamstrung them, and then only he trusted, went in the Lord, and was winning his victory. So I mean, it's working for him. It's working what he's doing. Yeah.
Deuteronomy 17 is what he was referring to, where it says when you go and take another country, you go into these cities, you're not to have horses, and you're to destroy all these things.
Deuteronomy 17.
But it could have been that he left those horses for the king of, for Zobah, for them to use. Again, it sounded like he hamstrung a bunch of them and did this to the rest of them so they wouldn't be a threat in the future. I'm just wondering. It doesn't say one way or the other, but maybe he just said, "I'll just leave these with you, and you can have the." Again, on a military thing, when we have a pact with someone, well, you can only have this many military planes. You can only have this many. We want to just kind of keep you guys under wraps.
Yeah, we would do that with which is weird, but we would do that with Humvees. So it costs us too much money to move these Humvees back, so we'll let you use them as vehicles, but we're going to break all the turrets, so you can't use them as turrets. But and again, I never thought about those part when you get to the horses. I just thought he used 100 for him. In my mindset was for logistics, for traveling, but it absolutely could have been. It's a good thought. Any other comments with that? Okay, moving forward, so we get to David and Ammon in Syria. So 2 Samuel 10, 1 through 3. After this, the king of the Ammonites died, and Hanan, his son, reigned in his place. And David said, I will deal loyally with Hanan, the son of Nahash, as his father dealt loyally with me. So David sent by his servants to console him concerning his father. And David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. Going forward, this is David's mindset. This is David's compassion that we see. Like I said, we're seeing a lot of characteristics in David. This is David's compassion. I will deal loyally with Hanan, the son of Nahash. Moving forward, after this, I'll keep going. We know what Hanan will do. So David sent his servants to console him concerning his father, and David's servants came into the land of the Ammonites. So this is 2 Samuel chapter 10. I'm in verse 3 now. But the princes of the Ammonites said to Hanan their lord, do you think because David had sent comforters to you that he is honoring your father? Has not David sent his servants to you to search the city and to spy it out and to overthrow it? So Hanan took David's servants and shaved off half the beard of each and cut off their garments in the middle at their hips and sent them away. When it was told David, he sent to meet them, for the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, remain at Jericho until your beards have grown, and then return. And then we're continuing on with that piece. So that's a notable point. When David sends these guys. He's dealing loyally with Hanan. So, yeah, sorry, I was mixing up the names. So David was dealing loyal with Hanan. He sent the servants to go up to comfort. Hanan starts getting some advice that's going to end up working against him. That's going to say the least, work against him. But the part that brings out David, the character in David, is what he does. So you think of politics and you think of the political mindset. I mean, you use something. You use an attack like 9/11 or any other instance. You use that to start your war, right? Like those are incidents that you use. David could have taken these servants, because shaving the beard is disgraceful to them, because their beard is, I mean, that's everything to them. And the clean-shaven ones are the slaves. And then obviously cutting the garments in the middle, very disgraceful. David could have used that. He could have taken his servants. He could have paraded them around and said, see what they did to us, see what they're doing to servants. I was dealing loyally with them. I was trying to show compassion to them. But he didn't. He kept them there till they could regrow their beards, till they could come back and still have that, the honor of them in the beards, because it's a big part to them. Again, it's one of those things that you see with David, that there's other routes he could have taken. There's other things he could have done there that we wouldn't think about, but in that time, it would have been a tactical decision to do.
That is a real paradox. He was so brutal with Moab and so lenient, inordinately so in this case, saying, I know you've disgraced my servants, and by extension you've disgraced me and my gift, yet I'm not going to retaliate.
Yeah, no, and it's where he could have. Today, you think of the leaders. I don't think they would have. Would have been a use. Would have been a tool. They'd have been on a commercial. But it's one of those thoughts that you see where his character. He absolutely retaliates. Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't use these guys.
Mm-mm.
He didn't need any motive. I don't think he needed any motivation.
No. Yeah. No. He retaliates. And the thing, Ammon saw it. He saw it coming. So when you talk about him, when they knew after that peace, when the Ammonites saw that they had become a stench to David, the Ammonites sent and hired the Syrians of Bathsheba and the Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 foot soldiers. And so they knew. It's interesting to you react in that manner when David sends people to console you. You react in that manner, and then after you do it, you're like, oh, like the man whose victories are won by the Lord, we became a stench. So then you're all of a sudden your reaction. It's interesting to see that the human characteristics that we all have, that I mean, they signed their own death warrant is what they did. Anything else with that piece? So specifically, continuing on, moving further down. I like Job. So if we keep reading with it, so I just read to you verse 6 and then verse 7. And when David heard of it, he sent Job and all the host of the mighty men. It's one of our first. We're hearing about the mighty men. And the Ammonites came out and drew up in battle array at the entrance of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and the men of Tob and Maacah were by themselves in the open country. So the reason why I want to bring this part in is when we get to Job. So that was verse 9, verse 10. The rest of the men, verse 9. When Job saw that the battle was set against him, both in front and in the rear, he chose some of the best men of Israel and arrayed them against the Syrians. The rest of his men he put in the charge of Abishai, his brother, and he arrayed them against the Ammonites. And he said, if the Syrians are too strong for me, then you shall help me. But if the Ammonites are too strong for you, then I will come and help you. Be of good courage, and let us be courageous for our people and for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what seems good to him. That's that like gets read, and after all the battles and all the killing and all the numbers that you've seen and you continue to see in 1st and 2nd Samuel, that's like the stopping point where you look at it again and you go like, that was very big. That moment right there was very big. You're facing these troops, and instead of thinking about, because they could tactfully withdraw, they can retreat, they can find ways around, but that was never even a thought in Job's mind. It never even came up. He didn't even bring it up. They didn't discuss, you don't hear anything about a discussion of, okay, if this doesn't work out, here's our egress route. This is how we're getting out. It was never even a thought. If they're too much for me, you're going to help me. If they're too much for you, I'm going to help you, because we're fighting for Israel, we're fighting for our Lord. And that's, I mean, to me, when you start, Job is one of those guys that right then, there's so much with him, his characteristics, his thoughts when it came to that mindset of, you don't hear anything about it, so okay, like, if they're too much, you're going to help. If you're too much, I've got you. But it's all for the Lord, and that I love that moment. I'm a big fan of that moment. You don't hear anything about if something goes wrong. We're going to run out of time here, which is, okay, so we're moving. I know we're moving kind of quick. David and Bathsheba. So we're moving up to the next chapter, and then after this chapter, we'll probably close out from there. So David and Bathsheba. So you go to 2 Samuel chapter 11, verses 1 through 5, reading about it. I'll read it. David and Bathsheba. In the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. Like, starting right there with verse 1. Why did David remain in Jerusalem? That's a question that everybody has, these questions like that we don't know the answer to. We don't know that answer. I really want to know why David remained there. So in the wintertime, in that era, and we don't know the exact answer. The wintertime is cold, it's muddy, it rains, logistics is hard, fighting is not happening as much. Maybe it is a little bit, but not as much. So when the spring comes, the roads start drying up, the trails start drying up, that's when the battles start, because it's logistically makes sense, it's easier to take care of your troops. So when the spring comes, it's when the battles come. Especially when you're talking about that time frame. Why was David not with the troops in the beginning? It's a question. I don't know the answer, because you've seen so many characteristics of David. Why was he not there? He's a warrior. Everybody says this when they talk to me. Oh, yeah, David, he's a warrior. He's a warrior. Why wasn't he there? I don't know. I don't have that answer. None of us do. We will one day, but it won't be today. It's a point that I don't understand it. I put Galatians 5:16 on there because we know what happens with David and Bathsheba. He stays there. I think he should have been with the army. He stays there, and then he starts getting tempted. Galatians 5:16. Let me pull it up. But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. So walking by the Spirit, it's something that ties in. I like it, because if he would have been fighting the Lord's battles, if he would have been out there, he would not have been tempted not gratify the desires of the flesh. He should have been out there. He started to get tempted. We know he sees the temptation. He acts on the temptation, brings Bathsheba to his house with him. We can fast forward a little bit through that part, kind of like the movies where you start fast forwarding when you have the kids. We can fast forward a little bit through that part. Then David finds out. So David calls for Uriah, right? The wife, or the husband of him. And if you go to the very end, we talk about the mighty men. I didn't catch this until that. Uriah was mentioned as one of the mighty men. I didn't know that. I didn't know that till about like a week ago. Uriah he's the last one. He's the last one. You read the mighty men. He's the last name to be on there. This is one of David's mighty men that he has in Uriah. And 2 Samuel chapter 11, 8 through 11, we talk about Uriah's honor. I love this part because he's like, I love Uriah. I should probably word that better. I love Uriah's characteristics in this part. He is not willing, like it's something that you read over and you may not look too deep into it, but he doesn't go back home to the comforts. He's not going back to the comforts when David tells him to go back and wash your feet. He's like, go back, let your hair down. Go be with your wife. And Uriah is not, because his men, his companions are still out there. They're in the middle of it, in the thick of it, battling.
He was the absolute contrast to what David had become. He was serving and David was not.
Exactly. That was way better put than what I was trying to word it as. But no, that's he was not willing whatsoever to go in and make any comforts for himself. And David was trying to get him to, because he knew Bathsheba was pregnant, and now Uriah needs to go be with his wife, and it didn't work. Uriah's character was untested. So then you fast forward more. David decides to take it to the next step, and he starts bringing other people into his sin. So what started as one sin is now starting to work its way into multiple sins. Because what happens after with David, let me go to it. All right, so Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. So Uriah did not go home. David invited him, and he ate in his presence and drank, so they made him drunk. And in the evening he went out to lie on his couch with the servants of the Lord, but he did not go down to his house. That's Uriah. In verse 14 in chapter 11, in the morning David wrote a letter to Job and sent it by the hand of Uriah. He trusted Uriah's integrity so much, he wrote Uriah's death note, and Uriah carried it. The integrity of, because you're not opening the king's message if it's not to you. And Uriah didn't. Uriah didn't open it. He knew his integrity as a man, and David used it against him. So set Uriah, in the letter he wrote, set Uriah in the forefront of the hardest fighting, and then draw back from him that he may be struck down and die. And then go forward. Job did that. So you have Job. You just talked about Job. You just talked about how Job was relentless. Never thought about retreat. Never thought about pulling back. Because he's believing in the Lord's battle. He believes in the Lord's victory, and unhesitation, no hesitation whatsoever. And then now David is using Job as a part of this sin. There's a lot of character going on in David we're talking about. He's afraid, he's angry, he's a warrior, just relentless, just relentless. Doesn't care what the people think of him. He's going to worship the Lord. Dedicated, compassionate, sinful, making mistakes and bringing others into it now. And now he's drawing more people into sin. His sin's one's becoming two, and now he's bringing people into it.
In Jeff's study on integrity, did you mentioned this episode, didn't you? Or you didn't? But the point was that when we lack integrity, it affects not just us, but everyone that we touch in that situation. So yeah, it affected Uriah. It affected Joab. It affected everybody that had a part to play, because Joab was part of the misgotten plot against Uriah and trying to hide David's sin.
Yeah, and we're hitting the point anyway. So the reason why we all like David. Nobody doesn't like David. But the reason why, like when I think about it and think about David, and I think about talking about David and teaching and bringing it up, he's a great, if you run into people, I run into a lot of people who are not, they did not grow up in the church. They did not, and they don't understand. David is an example to use, and there are people that will be really hesitant to, because you're saying at the same time, he's not allowed to build the temple. Right, there's so much bloodshed, he's not allowed to build the temple. We talked about that last week. But you got a lot of characteristics just like a person today, a lot of characteristics. Angry, afraid, fierce, forgiving, compassionate. You have a lot that you can use. Like I would, in the world that I live in, he's great. He's a great aspect to use. I know that the study was really fast-paced. I know that like we ran through a lot of it and we're jumping like multiple chapters. There's studies on David that somebody would do a lot better when it comes to like a 12-week study on David and really breaking it down. I was trying to focus on the military side so you can see some of the big pushes that just the amazing feats that David did through the Lord, not himself, through the Lord, and then when he didn't use the Lord, how it could backfire very hard on him. I appreciate it. I do. Any final comments on David before we wrap up? Okay, other than that, we'll just close out with prayer, and that'll be it. Lord, we come before you once again. We thank you. Thank you for this opportunity that we had. Thank you for giving us this day. Thank you for allowing us to, providing us with this building so that we can come and study your word and study about David and become closer to you. Lord, we ask that we take some of the information about David and just some of the information that was passed in class and we use it. We use it to talk to people who don't know you, who don't know your word, and bring them closer to you. As always, Lord, we ask that everything that was said is done according to your will and pleasing unto you. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.